Well, welcome to one more Monday Masterclass. Scott and I are here with you, and we're delighted to have you with us. You know, we record these, and so people can go back and listen to them again or whenever, or send other people to them. Of all the ones we've done so far, this might be one of the more valuable ones to have a recording for. The reason is what we're going to cover here today on economic probing questions, we really don't cover anywhere else. And as Scott and I were saying as we were getting ready for this session, you know, that's going to continue to be the case. We'll still have a whole bunch of e-learning out there, but you know, there's kind of a limit to how much you can put in that e-learning and expect people to go through. So as our knowledge base expands, the place that it's expanding into is the Blue Health area here. And so I think we're going to just see more and more coming on that as well. So this Monday Masterclass, as has been our habit, is going to be very informal. We'll take maybe half an hour at the beginning, if we even need that. If you've got any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll go ahead and we'll handle them right there as we're going through this. If you'd rather put it in the chat box and kind of compose your thoughts, that's fine too. Scott will be looking over that. Keep it informal. Ask us anything you've got, especially on the topic of economic probing for the first 30 minutes. Then the last half hour, free form. Anything you got, you know, throw your questions at us. As we like to do, I'll take the easy questions and we'll give Scott the hard ones, okay? That'll be the program here. All right. So let's do this. Let's go to Blue Health. This is the fount of all knowledge, isn't it, Scott?
It is. It really is.
Yep. Weren't you telling me this is probably the meaning of life is here, right here in Blue Health?
We'll go. It'd be interesting to see if the answer to that question is there. It might be kind of fun to put it there, actually.
Maybe I'll put that in the search box. What is the meaning of life? So today, though, we'll start a little bit smaller, and we're going to talk about economic probing questions. And what I mean by that is going to get a little bit more obvious as we go. There we go. We got economic probing questions here. You can see there's a few other ones in here. I'm going to click on this one, and this will take me right into an article. But when you guys are doing this, I'll tell you a little trick that I found. When you get to the article, sometimes you like to know what else is around that article. So if you start scrolling down here, look on the left. Nothing's happening, right? So I keep scrolling. Oh, this is in the larger section called How to Gather Economic Data During Interviews. So I'm going to click that. And then what that's going to do, it's got to give it a couple seconds. It has to think about this a little bit. See, now there was this particular article I found, but I kind of like coming up to the high level one here. So you might think about doing that as well. You could also simply just scroll through all the stuff if you wanted to, you know, on discovery. We're in this section on discovery. And it's not that bad to get through it, but you'll see there's a lot here. There's probing, and then a whole section on economic probing. So let's go in here. First thing, these are organized in a way that hopefully is helpful. Let's see, why do I need data for a value calculator? What is a value calculator? Okay, so we'll start with that. And so what we're saying here is you could do a really cool job of blueprinting. Man, you've got the market satisfaction gap chart, and you designed a wonderful product, you launched it, and you know what? You didn't do as well as you could have. Well, wait a minute, Dan. I did the market satisfaction gap. I designed the product. Yeah, but there were 3 other things you needed to do really well. And maybe you did, maybe you didn't. One is, did you price this thing sufficiently? Second one is, did you protect it with patents? And the third one is, did you promote it? So think of those 3 P's: pricing, protection, and promotion. You got to understand and meet customer needs, but then you got to price, protect, and promote it. Now, we're not going to get into the protection and promotion, but we are going to talk now about the pricing part of this. Now, if you're in B2C, you know, you do a Van Westendorp pricing survey and you ask people at what point the price seems too high and at what point. You can do that with consumer goods and B2B where you've got tens of thousands of customers. But when you are dealing with a more concentrated customer base where they know you're going to come back and negotiate with them, asking the question, how much is this worth, is not going to work for you. They won't get a straight answer. So that's why we see you need to build a value calculator. Now, this is not a Monday morning masterclass on value calculators. We'll have those at a different time. but they help you understand how much money your customer will make or save, and they help you raise the customer's perception of the value of your new product. So if you want to get our template, we have one in Excel. Just go to the Blue Tools section in your Blueprinting Center and download this template. And then if you want to know how to use it, go to e-learning module 8. This is one of our more valuable e-learning modules. And so that's all in the Blueprinting Center. Check that out when you get a chance. So now we know why we're going to ask good economic probing question for one simple reason. We want good raw material for our value calculator so we can get the proper pricing in there. Now, whoa, hit the wrong button there. Let's try that again. Let's go, I'm going to go down the left here. Fine, here we go. Click that. So now let's talk about economic probing questions. Now, this is the part that's new that we have not covered in our workshops or our e-learning before. And so we think there's 3 really important questions to ask. How often, how long, and how much? So let's take a look at those. So the how often is a frequency question. If you're talking to paint contractors, well, they talk about they need to remix the paint. Well, how often do you have to do that? Or packaging, how often does a machine break down? Or maybe they're making hair gel. How many batches do you make per shift? So you want to get the frequency. How often does some event happen that you might be able to improve, okay? Now, that event takes place, well, how long does it take place? How long does it take the paint contractors to remix? How long is it offline when it breaks down? Okay, we know how many batches you make, but how long does each batch take? So we got how often, how long, and then the most important is the impact. And this one is a little bit tricky. You're not going to be able to often say, well, how much does it cost to remix the paint? But you could say, well, who remixes the paint? The painter or his helper? And later on, figure out what their hourly wages are. Or this one, how much is your capacity impacted when the packaging machine breaks down? And is the operator typically doing other work? You say it takes 45 minutes to make a batch. Is he doing something else? No, there's nothing else for him to do. Well, then it doesn't help to, but how much would it help to cut this down? Could he be doing something else or not? So those are the sort of questions you want to ask on the how much. Now let's take an example. Let's see how this might work. So let's go to that paint example. So how often do paint contractors have to remix due to settling? How long does it take for them to remix? And then who remixes the paint? Now, this is where it gets interesting. I know a bunch of you folks are engineers and you love this stuff. Scott and I are engineers too. And not a lot I remember from my engineering classes, but one thing I remember is how to get these equations so you get an answer. So what you do is you multiply frequency times duration times impact. So what's the frequency? Hey, we have to remix it once per hour. Now, we want to get this in terms of an annual benefit. So we want to get that hour over to a year. So there's 8 hours per day and I cross out the hours. It's 250 work days per year and I cross out the days. So now that's going to give me 250 remixes per year. Everybody good on that? Now the duration, how long does it take? Well, it's 5 minutes per remix and there's an hour and 60 minutes. So I cross out, the minutes, and he's making $15 an hour. So I cross out the hour. So now I've got, I've got 5 divided by 60 times 15. And then I multiply that all through and I get $2,500. So now you may not get all this information, but keep asking these questions every time you do an interview, when you're taking a tour. Here you see how the math works out. But if you look at this, I like to do it this way because I can see if my units are crossing out, okay? And that gets me to $2,500 of lost contractor labor of value per year. And that's the trick. Now, let me just see if there's any questions on this so far. I'll take a sip of my Nespresso and you can see if you have any questions at all, okay? And Scott, anything in the chat box at this point?
Excuse me, not yet.
Okay, so that's how we do that. And this data would all get pumped into the value calculator. Now, how am I going to find all this? Gosh, I did like 9 discovery interviews. Where am I going to find this? Well, I'm glad you asked because that's the third article in here. The third article is how to search for this economic interview data in your discovery interviews. So let's go to that third one, and then we'll do an actual dive into the software, look at this thing. So we've got this kind of cool feature. I think we just started this year, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty sure we did. And so you can do searches across your entire company for keywords. So you could look up paint or settling or anything like that and get any information that anybody's done for the last several years, really, in their discovery interviews. That's the most common use of the search function. But here's another use of the search function, and that is to look for economic data in a particular project. So I'm going to show you this, but basically there's a search function, and you can come back here later and it'll explain exactly how to do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually do it in the software, because I think that's a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to go over to Blueprinter, and we're going to open up the semi-gloss home paint project. And we're going to maximize this right here. And then we're going to go to search interview notes. Now, again, the most common way that people use this is they put in a keyword like paint, and then they'll just do a search. And 92 occurrences in my company did the word paint come up, okay? Now, they might narrow the search a little bit, and they might just do a certain date range, or they might just do top picks and see what they get. Now they only get 44. So there's all kinds of ways of doing that if you're searching across your company. But there's a whole different way of doing this. I'm going to just X out of here and come back in. And that is if I want to search for economic data. Now, this may seem weird, but I'm not going to fill this box in, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Show Me. And instead of, notice it has all projects and all dates. So what we might do, oh, by the way, you may want to mute. You may want to mute if you don't have a question. Because we can hear you talking.
Dan, maybe I'll
Heiko? Yeah, go ahead and mute.
I'll mute everybody, and then just you unmute yourself. Then if anybody else has a question, feel free to jump in. But I'll mute everybody in the interim, I think. All right, here we go.
Perfect. You're not going to mute me, are you? There we go. I'm unmuted. So, okay. So here's what you do in this one. Leave the keywords blank. And now it says all projects and dates and sticky notes. Come up here and find your project, which is a semi-gloss home paint project. And now remember, it used to say all dates. Well, now we're not worried about all dates. We're worried about all interviews. You could do a search just for one particular interview. In fact, if you wanted to go to somebody else's project, find one particular interview and import it into your project. That's a great way of doing it. But that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to keep the semi-gloss paint project, and we're going to keep all interviews. We're going to keep all sticky notes, but here's what we're going to do. We're only going to look for sticky notes with numerical values, all right? Now we're going to find, okay, I don't really care about a 2 to 4 inch brush. That's not important, but this is interesting. They see this grit particle problem 1 to 2% of the time. That's good economic probing data. Oh, look at this. We've got dirt pickup about 1 to 2 grams per square meter, good economic probing. Oh, one coat of paint, maybe that's not terribly useful, or this is done in 1 day. But down here, look at, they see these problems with humidity, low humidity and dry winter about 5% of the time, okay? And this takes, oh, here's a duration one. This takes 3 to 4 minutes every time they have to remix the paint. Okay, so now what does this mean? You're probably already there. It means when you are doing your discovery interviews, you don't want to write out the number TWO, you want to put in the numerical 2. So whenever you're in discovery, here's a habit you want to get into. Use the numericals. That way, you don't have to try to figure out what the economic value is and how you're going to use this and how you build a value calculator. Just simply get in the habit of using numerical values as you're doing your interviews. If you'll do that, you'll be able to do this search later and get all this, this economic probing data here for yourselves. So let me stop, and Go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
Yes, we have a question in chat. What would be different in approach if I want to gather economic data in preference rather than discovery interviews?
Oh, nice. Let's go there. That's a wonderful question. So let's go to preference. Now, there won't be a search function for this, but you probably don't need it as much. Although, let me hold on that. We may want to add this, Scott, to one of our to-do lists. Here's where you really want to get that data here. So let's go over to a preference interview. We'll go to the premium paint company. So there's a couple of places. So when they say, how important is it to minimize the time to clean the food stains? They're going to do some debating. This is going to start over here, and you're going to move this over to here. But this is a wonderful time to do some probing. For those of you who remember the old Excel software, one of the frustrating things was you could either record their 1 to 10 score, or you could record notes, but you couldn't do both. Now you can do both on the same spot. So this is where I like to do some what and why probing. If you remember that what and why probing. So I'm gonna keep asking questions. Now, help me understand a little bit more about these food stains. Which walls are you normally seeing? What rooms are you seeing that in? So what percentage of time are you getting complaints on this? Those are the economic probing questions I'm gonna be asking right here. So I'm gonna get that captured here. I think that's probably the best place to do that. There's some other places where I'll probably keep up my habit of writing numericals. When I'm down in measuring outcomes, how would you measure this outcome is satisfied? I'm going to record the test method. And so there I'm going to be very detailed, getting as much. This is not as much for economic value calculator. It is for replicating the customer experience later. And the barely acceptable and totally satisfied, those actually could be quite helpful for me later to understand the limits. Now, when I get to the must-haves, I picked a bad example on this project because I didn't fill this out, but you would normally have several. Hang on a second, let me do this. We go back to a proper demo here so we can see this. We'll go to one that's filled in here, okay? We'll go to Amazon. So when you get to the must-haves, this is also another place to get some hard data down here. And then finally, the last place I would like to do this is this area here. Let me zoom this up a little bit so you can see that better. Okay, you're gonna say, if we could totally satisfy you in any, which top 3 would you pick? And here they're gonna say, oh, it's recycled content. Oh, really, why would you want that? What are the major categories? Oh, we could sell more. Now, we may have to use difficult or expensive methods and technology, so how aggressively should we pursue this? We'll pursue no matter what. Now, here is where we want to get it. Tell me a little bit more about what this would do for you. This is the why in the what and why. So if they tell me, we see X number of complaints per month, or it slows our process down by, 15%, I'm going to want to gather that data here as well. And then the last place is in the other information. And here there might be some benchmark data that's good, or just something else here. Scott, what occurs to me is people are going to probably need to focus on box damage from moisture, So if there's some comments, they're probably going to look for it here. But I think what would be helpful is that they could look at all the interviews on box damage from moisture at the same time. Did anybody tell us more about how much damage they were getting or the impact of that? So maybe we should put in our to-do list a search function around preference interviews that let you search on an outcome by outcome basis. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. Yep, 100%.
Great. Whoever asked that question, you're going to see a little something extra in your next paycheck. Okay, so make sure. That was a really good question. I appreciate that. That's very good, actually. Well, hopefully you can put this to good use. When you're doing your next interviews, getting the practice of getting those numericals down, getting the hard numbers in there. Tell your colleagues about it. They can search the Blue Help section, go to the economic probing, and they can maybe read that article and get a little bit more adept at that. And then try using those searches. Let me just do one last thing on this topic because I kind of gave it short shrift here. When you're back at the Blueprinting Center, go into the Blue Tools, and not the Blue Help, but the Blue Tools, And when you're ready to do a value calculator, it's a little bit hidden. You know, it doesn't really apply to any one particular step because you're really gathering data all through this. In reality, you're probably not going to fill it much in until you get a market satisfaction gap, right? And you kind of know which outcomes are really important to the customer. Then you want to see what's the value to the customer so you can price properly. So you're probably going to use it after preference interview. So we didn't know quite where to put it, but we put it in the skill building and other job aid section. So come over here, hit the skill building and other, and right there is the value calculator example. Let me just spend just a couple minutes on this very quickly. Please go to e-learning module number 8 for a lot more on this, okay? But I'm going to go ahead and download this Excel-based software. Now, someday my dream is to have this in the cloud, and we got some pretty cool ideas, but it's not going to happen right away, right, Scott? We got a pretty long list of stuff to work on. But here's the way this works. I would start, if you're going to do this, to go to the tips section first, and it'll give you some ideas on how to use this. And it'll tell you that there are 2 tabs. If you are making a material or something that gets used on a regular basis, use the gel example. In other words, there's no big upfront investment. If you're selling them a component or a piece of equipment and there's a big upfront investment, use the bagger example, okay? And it'll explain that in the tips. But basically what you're doing here on this is you're getting these benefits over here on the left, and you're building a value calculator by putting in some of the variables. The ones in white, let me just zoom this a little bit here. The ones in white you've created so anybody can change, let's go up to this one, the number of batches per shift, the number of shifts per day, the number of days operation. Those are variables you can change. And when somebody puts that in, and they put in how long it takes to mix, they get $84,000 of cost. And then if you say, oh, I think our product, let me just get that set up here, is going to let them do it in 15 minutes, then the annual cost is going to be $28,000, a difference of $56,000. That's the benefit. And then the customer can say what they think is going to happen. And the customer can even do a trial. They won't tell you what the results are, but they can do a trial. And that means they're going to be able to see all these benefits, example, expected and documented. And typically, if you look at this thing, there's actually about twice as much benefit over here coming to the customer as there is coming back to us in pricing. And that's not unusual. Very, very rough rule of thumb is if you provide $1 million of benefit to the customer, you'll probably keep 300,000 or 400,000 of it through increased pricing. Very rough. The better your patent protection, the higher the slice of what we call the value salami would be. So anyway, we won't spend more time in the value calculator unless you got questions, but I just wanted you to know where to find that and then learn about it in e-learning module 8. And then you can find the actual calculator here in Blue Tools. And by the way, in Blue Help, as you might imagine, if I click on this, the fount of all knowledge, right? But if I put value calculator here, I'm going to go ahead and get all kinds of information on a value calculator. So don't feel like you need to go to your e-learning for that. Hang on, right there. How to build and use. And there we're going to have actually five articles on value calculators. So everything you need to know is right in here. Okay, I think I've come to the end of my ranting about economic probing questions. Before we open up the line for any questions anybody has, anything else on economic probing questions or pricing or value calculators before we see if there's any other open-ended questions? All right, very good. I hope that was helpful. Now, sometimes we have no questions, sometimes we have. You guys may have been out there doing discovery or preference or something else and had a question for us. Anything we can help with at all? Any free-form questions? Great. Anybody need help getting through your work on a Monday? Okay. Well, you know, we really appreciate you coming here for this. we're going to keep these going. Scott and I enjoy these a lot. If you think of something, go, oh man, I have a question. Why didn't I ask? Or it came up after the meeting, drop us an email. We're always delighted to work with you and answer questions you may have. Hey, before we go, Scott, let me just go back to the AIM area. Do you want to just mention a little bit about the next Monday Masterclass? I'm going to go to training, blueprinting training. I'm going to come down to Monday Masterclass. Now, we usually do 2 per month. We're going to take off for the second half of December, so we won't have anything there. By the way, don't forget, all of these are in here. This will be in here another day or two, these past recordings. And Scott, why don't you just mention a couple words about our next one, which you are leading, on the 7 discovery interview gambits.
Yeah, Dan, you know, of course, during our blueprinting training, we teach basics of interviewing and beginning with open-ended questions and probing. But, you know, over the years, I've just run across a few little techniques, a few little tricks that just really work. They're very efficient. They're almost like some additional triggering tools, but just some very efficient additional questioning techniques. So again, this is the Monday Masterclass. We're moving beyond the basics. Having said that, there's nothing complex about them. A beginner can certainly start using these as well. But anyway, like I was sharing, I think at the beginning, you know, so these are some of my very secret techniques. So we'll just want to keep these all here within the family. But they're things that have proven to work for me over time, and I hope they'll be useful for everybody else as well.
Well, before we close out, I'll just tell a very quick story. So for those of you who don't know, Scott spent a great deal of his career, not only at John Deere and other places, but he was actually somebody who did interviewing as a job full time. So the first time I met Scott, he came to one of our workshops. It was on Blue Belt. We were starting to work on this new probing method where we get point score. It's very similar to the taxi exercise. So he was in the moderator, and the impression I had was of a skeet shooter going pull, pull, pull. He just completely decimated all the probing. Just did a beautiful job. It was just like a master work. So do come back for Scott's tips on interviewing gambits. I think you're going to enjoy it. Any last call for questions before we say so long? Anybody?
Dan, we do have something in chat. Let's see. Here we go. I'll just read it. If I want to remove customers that were transferred from the discovery interview into preference interview window, can I do that? We want preference interviews. So I'm not quite sure I follow this question. Olga, feel free to unmute if you want to help us, if you want to clarify that.
Hey, so we, good morning, everybody. Yes. So we done discovery interviews, right? And then when you go to preference interviews, I think the candidates we put in, logged in the discovery interviews get transferred into the preference interview window. And we will not use all of those customers for our preference interviews for some reasons. And then I cannot say that, but it's kind of they pollute the window. I was not sure. Is it okay to remove it, and how to remove the customers we want interview in preference?
Perfect. That's a wonderful question, Olga. And it comes up for discovery. And sometimes people put a lot of companies in discovery and go, oh, I don't want that in there anymore. And it's okay to have it not targeted, but still it's cluttering things up. So we have in our development pipeline something where we're going to have active practice interviews and archive or inactive. I can't remember the name. Now that might be a few months before we get it. So here's a little trick you can do in the meantime. Here's what I do if I don't want to see things. Let's say I don't want to have my Zappos interview in here. Now, you can't delete it. And there's a reason you can't, and that is because there's no privileges. Anybody in your team, maybe somebody who hasn't been trained very well, could come in here, and you don't want them deleting a project by mistake. But here's what you can do. Now, don't laugh at me on this, but here's what I do. I hit plus company, and I put a period in there, okay? And then I hit plus company again, and I put in archive or inactive, okay? And then what I do is I take Zappos right here, and I drag it down to the archive section.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that will work.
Yeah, it's not elegant. It's not elegant, but it gets the job done. later we'll have an actual
Yes.
archive section for you, but it kind of gets the job done for now. Thanks, Olga. Good
Thank
question.
you.
You bet.
Dan, we
Any
have
other
another
questions?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in one of our, I'm gonna read it. In one of our markets, customers are very hesitant to share this type of information. I presume that means the economic data numbers, specifically in automotive and semiconductor.
Yeah, that's right. Very good point. They will be. And that's because they understand. In fact, let me just back up a second. I often have our clients say, what if my customer comes, what if my supplier comes to me? Should I do a discovery interview with them? And I say, absolutely, because you want to form good communication between yourself and your supplier so they can bring innovation to you. I say, however, there's one thing that you should do differently than if you were the supplier, and that is don't give them too much economic data, okay? Just say it happens a lot, or it happens at fair. Just don't give them too much. So your customer's actually being quite wise. They actually, when you do an interview of a customer, you have two modes going at once. One is the value creation mode. You're trying, how can I bring value? And they want to help you on that. The competing mode is the value capture mode. So in the back of your mind, how often does that happen? How long? And they really should not be helping you too much on that, okay? So your customer is very wise, maybe been well-trained and so forth. So what I would do is at least try, if you will ever get this economic probing data out of them, it will be in the middle of an interview where they are engaged and they've got sticky notes up there and you're asking good questions, and you are the student and they are the master. Now, what I'm telling you is this environment provides the absolute best opportunity, and because your competitors face the same problem, right? So it puts you way ahead of your competitors. You'll get more economic probing, but you may not get it all. So what do you do if you can't get it all? That's where I would probably go to GLG or Alpha Sites or some industry network. And what I would do is I would contract with some industry experts, and I would say, now I don't want you to give any specific information from your last employer or anything, but on average, what do you think the level of downtime is when this sort of thing happens? Tell me a little bit more about productivity improvements here. So get as much as you can. You'll get a lot in the heat of the moment. You'll be amazed at how much they'll give you in a discovery interview versus a sales call. But if you still are missing things and you keep trying customer after customer to build this puzzle and you still can't get it, then go to the industry experts and pay for some hourly interviews. Does that help? I don't know who asked the question. Any follow-up on that?
So I have a follow-up question to your answer, which was great. Thank you. So if we are going through that, right, through the interview, and like you said, everybody is engaged and involved, and some information gets spilled that customer might later kind of, I shouldn't have said that, right? But then we send them the printout of the whole interview with the all recorded answers. And if we kind of feel that they might be regretting that they said what they said, or maybe they feel that somebody in the team kind of said a little bit more that the team in general wanted to be said, how do we handle these type of situations? What do you?
Wonderful question, Olga. So let's say, in fact, you are in the middle of an interview here. And now, if you have a non-disclosure agreement, this is a really good idea. But even if you don't have a non-disclosure agreement, let's imagine somebody said something about reducing the time to track boxes, and everybody else looked at Fred and go, "Oh, Fred, you really shouldn't have said that." Then here's what you do. At the end of the interview, to be professional and to be considerate of your customers, you say, "Listen, as you know, this is an industry-facing project. Now, was there anything here that you feel is only for you that you would rather not have part of the industry-facing project? And if we don't hear, from other places, we'll just set it aside." And they might go, "Oh yeah, note number 8. Oh my goodness, we kind of wish it had not come up." then there's two things you could do here. You could say, well, let me do this. Let me cloak this. And when I cloak it, that means it's unsearchable. Nobody will ever be able to find it. And not only that, but I'll go ahead and I'll put in the word confidential here. So that's one way of handling it. The other way of handling it is you could just say, let's say we're back here. You say, anybody uncomfortable with something? And they might go, yeah, I wasn't comfortable with this. You know what? Just wipe the thing out, you know? But do you guys feel more comfortable if we got rid of it? Yeah, that would really be better. Fine, let's just do that. Now, you've still heard it, right? And your observer maybe even made some notes by pen or pencil. Now, if it's gone from this interview and it doesn't come up in the rest of the project, it probably isn't that helpful for you. But you get to determine whether or not you use it. But if you use it, you got to be very careful about it and treat it as confidential to that customer. Okay. Does that help, Olga?
It does very much. I like this idea of after the interview, if there was any attention or looks, to just mention, hey, it's industry facing, which of this information you would not want to be disclosed. Or I think that will put customer at ease too, and it will help us to feel that we keep everything professional and we value our customers and the fact that they are open with us. So I like it.
I think I think it's a good point. I think the value that we give them, I think it's a good point you're making. The other thing you can do is at the beginning of the interview, if people seem like they're a little bit uncomfortable, we don't want to give up information, just say, hey, listen, folks, we are here to bring value to you and others in the industry. And so what we want to know is how can we do a better job? We got a bunch of scientists and chemists and engineers back here. We just want to make sure we're working on the right thing. However, if there's some things that you don't want to tell us, we really want to respect that. And we're not trying to get stuff out of you don't want to tell us. Just tell us what you think we should know so we can do a better job on your behalf. That, I think, is the way to go on that. Yeah. Thanks, Olga. Thanks again for coming. You all have great rest of the year, great holidays. We'll see you back in January, hopefully, for Scott's Gambits. In the meantime, if you got any questions, we can help. You know where we live. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Have a great week, everybody.